This video is meant for runners who already have a good base understanding of RNG manipulation and their IGT failures. If not, I recommend this video by Hwangbro explaining RNG manipulation. Link will be in description. In this guide, I will start by explaining why tracking is useful, then go over Nido, Moon, and Can's manips with their implications, and I will end by going over a number of extra topics related to tracking. The goal of IGT tracking is to guarantee the success of your manips. By keeping track of the in-game time, we can make sure to save on a frame cluster, which causes no failures. This changes odds of success from around 95% for Nido and 89% for Moon to 100% if done properly. This can also be used to improve Can's manip consistency, average, and top-end speed. This tutorial will focus on emulator runs. For console, runners usually will have enough knowledge to adapt the info I give in this guide to their setup. Last before starting, this tech was designed and realized by Grogir, so big thanks to him for this. His first Pastebin explaining how to IGT track will be linked below. To track, we use the Flowtimer program. It has an IGT tracking tab. The start button allows you to start your timer, and as it's running, you can hit the play button for beeps to start playing. You can customize the number of beeps you hear and the interval between them as you like. Gen 1 games run at 59.7275 FPS, so make sure to select it or else your timer will passively desync with the IGT. So our objective is to get this timer to beep every single time a selected frame rolls around, so we can save at that time. To achieve this, we first need to synchronize starting the timer with the IGT starting. We know that the IGT starts advancing after the intro as you spawn in your room. We can then start our timer exactly when clearing the last intro text box. Both timers won't start at the same exact time, but as long as you always start when clearing the last text box, you can add a fixed offset that will stay the same across run to fix this delay. The difference in flat seconds actually doesn't matter, only the frames need to be synced, meaning that if your timer is off with the IGT by a multiple of 60 frames, it doesn't matter. If it trails by exactly 3 seconds, you'll still hit the frames you want. Therefore, the offset value will always be between 0 and 1004 ms, which is 60 frames at this game's FPS. For now, we don't know what this offset is. We can discover what this offset needs to be by playing through a practice run, saving on a beep, and checking which frame we hit, then modifying the offset accordingly. You could also calibrate after a PB attempt, but it would need to die before Moon, else the save would get overwritten. I've done a practice run up to here as an example. So, we play the timer, walk to the tile, and hit save on a beep. The easiest way to check which frame we hit is to use pichusav. The link will be in description. My saves are at this location by default. Yours might be as well, but you also might need to find them on your own. So top left is IGT hour, then IGT minute, IGT seconds, and bottom right are the frames, which is what we want. Knowing that we hit frame 20 and we tried to hit frame 0, this means that we want the beeps to be 40 frames later than what they were. To find what that means for an offset in milliseconds, we can use the game's FPS to find the length of a frame in milliseconds, and then multiply it with the number of frames we want to add, and then add that as an offset. For this example, however, I may have omitted to divulge some information. The IGT does not in fact continuously advance while you're running. In fact, during widescreen transitions for which the LCD is disabled, IGT does not advance. That's valid for all map transitions, battle transitions, but also loading the Pokédex, loading the Pokémon list, or even the trainer card. Since we're doing a speedrun where we follow a route, however, many delays always happen the same every run. For example, entering and exiting the mart, or doing the rival 1 fight, we always do the same. For this example, these things happened, meaning that the offset I found will work for any other run where those delays are also caused. We often say that those delays were put into the offset. Unfortunately, Route 1 does cause variable delay in the form of battle transitions from encounters. This is why we have an encounter counter in Flowtimer. The delay that one encounter causes has been timed, and adding 1 to the counter will delay our external timer for the same duration that that battle transition delayed the IGT. For my example, you may have noticed I did mark the encounters. This offset I found in this example is very close to universal. The only subjectivity related to it is where you hit A relative to when the beep is playing. For your runs, I recommend starting with this offset and tweaking it while you're doing attempts. Most runners track frame 2. If you like, you could sift through IGT data to find the cluster that you prefer. Link will be in the description, but I do recommend you simply track frame 2. One thing to note is if you use a potion during the first rival fight, you load the Pokemon list, so there's a delay. I will explain it more in details in the next section. The first major aspect to moon tracking is the timing when you reset for Nido Manip. In between when you hit save and when you hit reset, the external timer is running, but the IGT isn't. In order for that delay to be included in the offset for moon, it needs to be consistent across every run. The easiest way to achieve this is to save and reset at the same time. If you press both buttons relatively at the same time, there's no chance it will corrupt. However, if you press both buttons before the game is even able to save, the A press won't do anything and you will reset and you will lose the run. It's better to be safe and wait an extra second when the timing of the beep looks like it might be tight. You can also try to have a consistent delay between saving and resetting, but that has little upside and adds inconsistency, so I don't recommend it. For the rest of the time while the game is booting up, this is consistent and goes into the offset. The Nido encounter technically could be tracked, but since it always happens, I don't mark it. The same thing applies for the extended Pidgey. However, if you miss extended and go for Route 3 bird, you need to remember that if you don't mark the extended bird, you also need to not mark that encounter. In the forest, since it's a sub/inside area, the delay caused by having an encounter is different, which is why we have a different counter for it. I also mentioned earlier that opening and closing the Pokemon list causes delays. We have 3 separate counters for that, depending on where you are when you load the list. Using potion or antidote counts, swapping Nido and Squirtle before Brock counts, but also using rare candies or teaching a move, since it loads the list, it also counts. So don't be fooled by the naming. Anything that loads the list counts. Also, the fact that the delay is linked to loading the list means that you don't actually have to use the item for the delay to happen. Sometimes you try to use the wrong item on accident and load the list. For example, you might want to potion before Brock and use the antidote instead. Go back out, go to the potion, then use it. If this happens, it actually counts as 2, because when you use the antidote, you loaded the list, backed out, and used the potion, so that's obviously 2. For the purposes of healing or swapping before Brock, the forest, transition house, and mart and gym all count as inside or indoors. Pewter or Route 2 are outdoors. During the Brock fight, you swap a bunch, but those always happen the same every run, so I don't mark them. You still mark your pots though. Changing the options does not delay, which also reminds me that picking up the potion in the PC before Rival 1 also doesn't delay. Using it does, obviously. Going to Mart before or after Brock doesn't change anything for moon tracking. However, if you go twice by accident, it does cause a delay that we can't track. However, we can roughly track it by adding an encounter. It makes things very unprecise, but on average, tracking will still be a benefit. When going to use potions for before Shorts Guy, sometimes you go open Pokemon menu by accident. That counts. Using the potion also counts. Using the antidote by accident again also counts. Sometimes when you have a Squirtle with low enough HP, usually not at 7 but on 3 to 5, you can send it out to die against the Ekans to save good HP. If you do that, it actually counts as 2 because you switch in the Squirtle, and after it dies, you will switch back in the Nido. When walking to the save spot, there's 2 tiles that can generate encounters. You need to make sure to mark them before saving for Moon Manip. This is harder when you're in red bar, because after the encounter, you're going straight to save, so you have less time. For this, I recommend using hotkeys. So if you go into settings, you can select your hotkeys. This also means that be careful when you're typing during a run, because those hotkeys being global, you can mess up your tracking, but also you could just reset your timer, so be careful. When going to save for Moon Manip, you go over the trainer card. If you accidentally select it, the timer desyncs by an untrackable amount with the current Flowtimer build. For Moon, most people track frame 7, and you can use the same offset I use, which is 156. To keep can tracking possible, you also need a consistent delay when saving and resetting for Moon Manip. Again, I press save and reset at the same time. Cans tracking used to be a joke, since it only improves at 96.6% manip to 100%. And there also already existed an alternative manip that had the 100% success rate, albeit slightly slower. But you just have to get IGT'd once, and suddenly tracking doesn't seem that silly. It also ends up being better than the 60-60 cans manip, because that manip wastes 4 steps and has a start flash, meaning that even with worst RNG, tracking saves time to it. For this manip, we track frame 6 and do the 57 cans manip, which is 58 cans with no A presses. This manip fails on frames 35, 36, and 37, meaning that we have a massive window in which we can save. We can use this to, instead of simply tapping, when the beep rolls around, we can mash anytime the beep comes around. The delay between when we save and when we reset does not matter, since there is no manip that's coming after this. Doing the mashing technique, you can often save time on 58 cans, because that manip has 4 frames of time lost due to A presses, and if you get a good cycle, you lose no time because when doing 58 cans, you're just spamming A. But if you get a good cycle with tracking, it's simply faster. This means that tracking with 57 cans is the best top-end strat, as well as being the safest and the fastest on average. For this minip, encounters in Moon are one of the first things you track. They count as encounters in Forest. As I said, cans tracking was never meant to be an actual thing. This should just say encounters inside. Before actually Moon encounters, there's if you had red bar for Paras and healed before Moon Rocket, those are heal swap indoors. Next spot is Bill. This is also indoors, the healing you do before Misty. If you do the 24 Misty strat, you enter the Dig Rocket house one less time than usual. You can roughly adjust, again, like I said when I talked about Pewter Mart, you can roughly adjust by removing an encounter this time. If you potion after the Misty fight and get IT again, you will enter the bike shop an extra time. You can add an encounter to, again, roughly adjust for it. This is fine for cans since we have such a massive window. You mark Route 6 encounters. And the last thing is on Boat Rival, if you heal or you swap, you mark those. For cans, you can use this offset as a basis, 601. You probably will have to tweak it a bit, as for the Moon offset and Nido offset, but these are good starting points. Most likely you can just adjust while on runs to tweak these offsets. When starting your timer, you can have what your start timer keybind is, be global, and set your secondary A or B setting to it to allow you to press a single button to clear the text box and start the timer at the same time. This is allowed since consoles can also bind two keys to one input. The timing at which you clear the last intro text box can cause 1 to 3 frames of delay if you clear the text box perfectly. The text box in question prints at 4 characters every 4 frames. This is how we extend Pidgey and Forest and etc. minips, because those are doable as opposed to run 1 frame windows, which are a lot less consistent to try to hit. However, for this, this means that you can hit the A or B button 1 to 3 frames before the first frame where it can be cleared to kind of buffer the clear. However, the text box is waiting for that time, for that frame to come around, but your timer is not. So if you perfectly clear the text box, you may cause 1 to 3 frames of extra delay. The easiest way to avoid this variance is to wait until the last text box has finished printing before clearing it and starting your timer. Even if there's a little difference, it doesn't actually matter that much. If you mess up the Nido manip and you have to reset again, you can start your timer and hit reset on the beep. This is to keep Moon tracking alive, and then you do the manip again, and it's as if you saved and reset, but instead you just only reset. Last thing is, if you track frame 2 like I recommended, you can do this alt movement after path to Pidgey to extend the triple extended manipulation for 2 more turns, making this a quintuple extend manip. Thanks for watching and good luck on your runs.